Content Championship time.
It is indeed.
We've
that
got
time
another dirty
episode.
one.
It is
Not
another
a- it's not-
dirty week.
While I enjoy this segment, it's not something I like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it was a fun idea, and then it's like you actually have to do it, and then you just feel bad.
Do you know what it is? It's like that. Not that I've done it in a long time, but you know, like doing exercise, and like afterwards, you're like, oh, I'm glad I did that. I feel better for doing that. But you
Yeah.
hate every second of it while you're doing it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's kind of like that. So, this week's Content Championship is, of course, Daredevil versus Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Rings. As always, we have our 6 headers we use to try and make this more palatable.
Yes.
Which are personal relevance, how well we think it has aged, rewatchability of said project. Then we have the story, the acting, and the cinematography / general visuals. Let's get right into it. So, my personal relevance hasn't changed for these at all. There's no new context to add to these because why would there be? Personal relevance is, of course, for the Daredevil Netflix show, is it brought Daredevil to the mainstream fandom in a way that few other individual projects can do for a character. For better or for worse, there are now some people who think they know Daredevil who don't know as much as they think they know.
Yep.
But that's always going to happen. But it did, and it also got like, it got the bad taste of the Ben Affleck film out of our mouths and showed that Daredevil.
Yeah, no one even thinks about that anymore.
Yeah, it showed that Daredevil can be badass in live action.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, you've got the Fellowship of the Rings. And as I said last time, we discussed Fellowship. It's like the first film in what is largely regarded as one of the greatest trilogies of all time, as well as creating an entire new generation of fantasy fans. Being real in the modern world, how much do you reckon that Lord of the Rings trilogy did for D&D and all other fantasy, just fantasy as a genre? So much.
Yeah.
The amount of people who never thought about fantasy worlds, who when they were in their formative years watched Lord of the Rings and were like, oh, this is awesome, and then they just found any way they could to go back to these kind of fantasy worlds. Like, inspiring, changing, just different.
Like, not wrong at all. I mean, yeah, for personal relevance for me, it's like you've got, like you say, Daredevil brought it to the masses. I didn't really know Daredevil before that. It also, like, it set a new precedent of what a superhero TV show could be. We only had like the CW or any of the older stuff that was very old school in how they did things. Brought a whole new look to like the idea of a superhero show. And started a new era in that sense. But then it's Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is what sparked my love for fantasy. Was the trilogy films growing up. Like that, it's Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. That is what births all nerds in this universe. Maybe Star Trek. But that is the birthplace of all nerds. And
100%.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think it completely revitalized like fantasy for a whole new generation, and just like it's Lord of the Rings, like it's everything. Like I remember watching the first bit, like the first film, and opening your eyes to that whole world was just changed the world.
How well has it aged? In our entire bracket, these might be 2 of the strongest competitors in this category. Because Daredevil is seen as the gold standard for superhero TV.
Yeah.
And every time we get a show not as good as Daredevil, which is basically every show, people just point at Daredevil and go, just do that again. And then on the flip side, you have Lord of the Rings,
which you'll never be able to replicate again.
aged so phenomenally well that it is actually like just how well it is aged has actually made the fandom a little bit unbearable because they don't want anyone to even consider telling stories in that universe again because they're like, no, leave it, it's perfect.
Yeah, don't mess with what is.
Yeah,
Don't ruin it. No, I think you're right. I like Daredevil is, although it's not really that old in the grand scheme of things, like it's aged so well that like every superhero show, people look at it and they go, well, Netflix could do it. Why can't you do it properly? Like it set the precedent, like I said before, like this is the new standard of what we want everything to live up to. You're not meeting it. We still love that show. We still talk about it. So, but Lord of the Rings, like it's just any fantasy thing that comes out, like anything, you're like, but look at what Lord of the Rings did back in the day. Like even The Hobbit came out, and it's like the Lord of the Rings did it better, and it's older. Like it's
yeah.
just such a well put together trilogy that
It didn't
like,
compromise on anything. It just made sure it did it right.
and like it doesn't feel like anyone's got close to ever replicating that feeling from the Lord of
Yeah.
the Rings.
Rewatchability.
I would actually be more inclined to sit down, watch Lord of the Rings, knowing full well that then means I'm watching the whole trilogy before I'd consider watching Daredevil.
I think Daredevil is inherently very rewatchable because it strikes that perfect balance of you can happily binge it, but it was before Netflix got so heavy on the we're going to make you binge it all that the
Mm,
cuts weren't as aggressive, which meant you could also watch one episode and go, I'll come back to that. I'll watch another episode tomorrow night.
yeah,
Um, I find TV shows inherently more rewatchable.
yeah.
However, Lord of the Rings, I've since we discussed this the first time,
Mm.
I have got semi-verbal confirmation from Jenna that that can be the first thing we binge watch at the new house when we move in
What a way to
because she's
start.
never seen Lord of the Rings.
What?
Hey, you need to remember she grew up in an all-female household because her father died when she was
Still,
young.
still, there are some
um,
strong female characters in that.
Lord of the Rings wasn't the kind of thing that got watched in their house.
Hey,
Um,
Aragorn. Need I say more?
So that'll probably be one of the first. It'll be like okay, we have nothing to do this weekend. Let's watch Lord of the Rings. It'll be great. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But I still view it as a knock on. Bearing in mind we're just talking about the Fellowship here.
Still.
I find rewatchability of the Fellowship more difficult because A, you have to watch the extended cut, which is like 3.5 hours,
Okay.
and you will want to watch the entire trilogy, which is a big time
That's just
commitment.
a bonus.
Which means when I'm thinking about watching something, I would rather watch 3.5 hours of Daredevil because I'm like, I can put that down and come back to it very easily rather than watching that because then I'm like, right, well, I'm now up until we finish the trilogy. And I
I'm
view
okay
that as
with
a
that.
slight on the rewatchability for me personally.
See, I'm willing to put myself through that for the Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings.
you also work. You also work from home.
I don't see what this has to do with anything.
You can just watch them all on a loop on your second monitor while you're cracking on.
I'm just gonna get a TV when I have my own place.
It's
I'm
the
just
dream.
gonna have a monitor with a second computer on it. It's just loop all of Star Wars and into all of Lord of the Rings, back into
Yeah.
all of Star Wars.
That's what we need. We need a Spotify style app for nerd stuff. And you can build build playlists of certain moods, and you just have a like a little like Fire Stick type thing that runs it plugged into a TV above your setup. So you just sit down to work, and it's just gonna loop like episodes of your favorite nerd shows,
Mm-hmm.
your favorite films,
Mm-hmm.
and so you just be like, oh, Empire Strikes Back, sick, and then Empire Strikes Back's finished, and you get like a random episode of like Loki or whatever, and you're like, sick. Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah.
That's what my brain is.
Yeah.
Story.
I mean, does it really need to be discussed? I don't.
does,
I
'cause
don't
it's
know if you can compete
so
with an
we need to
amazing trilogy of books.
put this into context. Because of course, Lord of the Rings is a masterpiece. It
Mm.
is one of the greatest pieces of fiction written. That
Hmm.
isn't up for debate.
Hmm.
And it is the Fellowship is adapted beautifully from the source material.
Hmm.
But I don't want that to discredit how phenomenal the Daredevil story is.
I'm not. I'm not saying it's bad.
But this is what always hurts the most about these and why these are so
Mm.
dirty. Because we sit here and we gush over something and we're like, oh, it's so, so good.
Yep.
And it feels like while we're gushing over one thing, we're just like flipping the finger off to the other
Yeah, I
one.
know what you mean.
But like, as superhero media goes, the Daredevil show is some of the best writing we've actually seen.
And I'd be tempted to say it's like the best origin story we've had.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's like to be able to tell that on TV, and it was like set this new era of what was expected from the story of like a TV superhero show. Like,
And the way Netflix did their villains,
mm,
not just in Daredevil but also in Jessica Jones, because they did the same style. And it's my favorite way to do a villain is they have this person who is bad guy. You know
yep,
they're bad guy straight away. And then once they've introduced you to the bad guy, you then get more from the bad guy, and they make them a sympathetic character
mm,
because they've had a shit childhood, they've been
mm,
beaten up, they've been bullied, they've been made to feel less, and you start to feel sorry for them. You're like,
mm-hmm,
oh, I can see how they end up in this position. And then just they lure you into the bad guy, and you're like, oh, they're not all bad. They then do something completely irredeemable, and you're like, you piece of shit. And
yep,
it's beautiful because it's like, oh, bad guy, maybe not so bad. Oh, they're terrible.
yep,
And like that's really good writing, and it makes it sound so simple because it's like, okay, cool. So you tell a sob story, you feel better for the bad guy, and then you have them do something
mm-hmm,
so bad that you're like, oh no, they're definitely bad. But there's more to it than that because you can't just do it really like obnoxiously. Like,
yep,
oh, I had bad childhood. You have to genuinely get the writing across in such a way where you genuinely start to feel bad for the person. And some of the bad things they do initially don't seem that bad.
mm-hmm,
For instance, like Wilson Fisk, the
yep,
first person he killed was his abusive father.
yep,
And I don't think any sane person watching that, having seen how vile his father was, goes, oh, that's evil. It's
yeah,
like, no, he did that because he was trying to protect his mother and himself. Like, you get that.
yeah,
Um, But like I said, Lord of the Rings is the greatest fictional story ever
yeah.
told.
This is the tough thing. It's against Lord of the Rings, and it's
Yeah,
like there's a reason it's the best trilogy of films because it is one of the greatest series of books ever. It's like,
and it adapts faithfully,
yeah,
which is always the biggest stumbling block for books being turned into films.
yeah.
That's why we got shit Percy Jackson films, and now we're getting a really good TV show, hopefully.
It's like they knew what they were doing. Like they were like, we have great source material. There's no need to stray
Don't
away
waste
from it.
it.
Let's just visualize it,
Yeah,
and then boom, there we have
let's
it.
just make 5-hour films. Who cares?
Yeah,
They're nerds. They'll watch it.
exactly.
Acting. This is definitely a closer category.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings is fairly
Vincent
stacked though.
Vincent D'Onofrio and Charlie Cox are
Yep, they are.
sublime casting.
They are excellent castings, and they played each role incredibly, and they are those characters through and through.
But Lord of the Rings might have one of the most super powered casts known
But
to mankind.
well, one thing, Gandalf, just Gandalf.
Yeah.
Like, is there a better casting?
They just have so many nerd icons that are just so phenomenally good. Andy Serkis as Gollum.
Yeah, it's like it's just this is the issue with this one. It's like you're stacking someone against like the god, like it's just the cast is incredible. Everyone's performances are amazing. Like,
And
it's just,
cinematography.
I mean, New Zealand.
New Zealand's gorgeous. The Shire is gorgeous. And Peter Jackson had the balls to do what people are scared to do now. And instead
Practical.
of just for realism, it has to be dark so the people can't see anything. He gets asked, "Where's the light coming from?" And he goes to the same place as the music.
Yeah.
Who, yes, it's a battle at night. Guess what? The people still need to see what's happening. Otherwise, what's the fucking point of a battle at night?
Yeah. And
We'll put
also
some
it's like
lights on there. We won't make it like it look like it's
he
daytime, but people
he
need to see what's happening.
he didn't shy away from making people wear full outfits and actually trek up a mountain for the shot.
Yeah,
Like the dedication to it all it being as practical as possible.
it's always
Like,
the way to go.
yeah. There's a
I
reason it
I
still lives up to this day.
I yearn for the opportunity for a publisher to come to us and get us to write a comic book, and then someone to come to us and give us the ability to turn their comic book into a film, and we get to just sit there in that first meeting and go, if it's not practical, it's not fucking happening.
Yeah. Everyone is in practical suits. Costume designers need to figure it out.
The VFX guys are there for touch ups and the physically impossible. If we have to go miniatures and a drone, we will do that before VFX get involved.
I will
I
do a
don't
Lego
care.
figure as a stunt double if I have to.
Yeah. Like we're not fucking about here. Practical is always going to be better as a
And
base.
don't
I
get me
have
wrong.
no issue with VFX being used to touch stuff up and enhance it, but you've got to give it a real as possible base to make it look good.
And don't get us wrong. Daredevil had some stunning visuals. That famous corridor wanna, like, stunning, very practical as well. Like they did an incredible job for a TV show. They did the Netflix budget for a superhero
Yeah.
TV show. Like it's
The
why it's the
the
best.
I would say in the only point that might potentially sway people towards Daredevil in this category is that long the long one-shot fight sequences we got a couple of times.
Yeah, the one is.
They were a thing in like Japanese and Korean
Mhm.
action films.
Mhm.
This was the first project that brought it to the West so well,
Yep, did it
to
properly.
the point where now if I spot them like setting one up, I get excited.
Yeah.
Because there is something about a long one-shot sequence that I love, and just as an example of when it's done wrong, how infuriating it is. In the most recent James Bond film, they
Mm,
do one. They do a really, really good one, fighting upstairs. It's
Mhm.
fucking awesome. Me and my brother, who both love these shots, like we're absolute losers for these shots. They're like, yeah, this is fucking good. Then 2 seconds before the end of the sequence, they cut for no reason.
Yeah, I don't.
So like, I shit you not, they cut, and then there's one more punch to end the fighting, and
Yeah.
it's like, why have you cut?
Yeah.
And it's just, and this is the thing, you've got to do it all in one shot and make sure it's all done properly, otherwise it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
And I've not seen really any other Western projects consistently get that shit right, and they did it consistently.
Mm. Oh yeah, like
Um,
Daredevil like did some incredible things for a TV show. But again, it's against Lord of the Rings. It's like it's just an uphill fight for them.
so let's go through these and work out exactly how upsetting this scoring is.
Okay.
Personal relevance, I think we're both going to give Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
How well it's aged goes to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Rewatchability, I give to Daredevil.
I give to Lord of the Rings.
So that's halved.
Okay.
Story is Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Acting, I really struggle with. Because, yes, that Lord of the Rings cast is iconic, but Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, like, were no names to the majority of the world and became superstars.
Yeah, I could give that a tie because they did put on incredible performances.
Yeah. And cinematography is Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So it's 4-0.
Yeah.
It's a battering.
It's unfortunate that
But
I mean anyone against Lord of the Rings was gonna struggle
vehemently.
Yeah.
But that does not mean you should not go and watch
Daredevil.
Daredevil, because it is phenomenal.
It is.